Artificial intelligence research papers and models were released every day in the first half of 2022. AI continued to write hundreds of books. It created new pictures. It created the Moderna vaccine in hours instead of years. Many different countries created their own AI models, and AI got a lot smarter, beating humans in several IQ subtests. In June 2022, humans are ranked number 7 for intelligence. The sky is bigger than we imagine. This is my mid-2022 AI report. I couldn't wait till the end of the year because there's just so much coming out. There is literally a paper and or a model coming out every day. So even I can't keep up with what is coming out. Somewhere around the 15th or 16th of June, there was actually about 6 or 7 major milestones, major releases, and I'm still catching up with that. So this is a catch up, and this is an update of what's happened from January through to June 2022. Let's have a look. By the way, the latest AI models like to both read reports, which you can go and do. You can read the paper version of this report and watch videos. And you're currently listening to music composed by DeepMind's new Perceiver AR autoregressive model. This is piano music created with what is an advancement on the transformer model. I'll put the whole track at the end if you want to go and listen to it. Let's start out with a quote. This is from Professor Scott Aaronson, who is from Texas, but he's just about to join OpenAI, and he says, 2022 AI has recalibrated my understanding of what, for better or worse, the world is going to look like for the rest of our lives. Professor Scott Aaronson, a former child prodigy. There's a lot to update today. This might be a longer video. I'm hoping to get it out today for subscribers to the memo. Today is actually the 21st of June 2022. It's the winter solstice or the summer solstice, depending on which hemisphere you're in. So I think it's a really cool time to have an update and a report on the state of artificial intelligence. And let's start from the start. In 2020, I left my position as chairman for Mensa International's Gifted Families. It gave me a lot of oversight on what was happening worldwide with different countries catering for gifted children, gifted families. Don't think these children are blessed or just given everything in life. That might be a bit of a misunderstanding of what giftedness means. Like tallness, you can have intelligence and it is comparable. You've got tall people, you've got short people, you've got smart people and you've got not so smart people, and they are from all walks of life. In fact, with my visibility of what was happening worldwide across Mensa International, I did a lot of work with Malaysia, with Mexico, and with Belgium. It was very interesting to see how different countries were catering to this idea of smarts. But I was invited to speak at a seminar about my current focus on giftedness, and I went and spoke with GPT-3. You can see that original conversation in episode 0 of Lita AI, and it was that conversation having these outrageous questions answered by an artificial intelligence in real time via text, but it was recreated with video, that just shifted me away from human biological intelligence to this idea of augmented intelligence, amplified intelligence, and being able to rely on what has happened since 2020. So let's get an update on what's happened since the start of 2022. AI has been exploding in several metrics. Look at things like creativity. We never thought AI would get there. Training models to convergence, actually getting these 500 billion or so parameters and outputting a proper model. What about size of models in terms of parameters, or size of models in terms of data? And we're going to drill down into how much data now we're providing with these models. It's really been a watershed moment for AI, particularly with all of these labs working together. And this is a really unusual thing in the science community, is that they're sharing information between each other, and it's less competitive than one might imagine. I still like to refer to this as the AI gold rush. New AI models are popping up weekly. I've documented them. Here you can see a bit of a glance at what's happened in the first half of 2022. Most of these models seem to be research only, so not available to the public, but there is a large percentage there that you can go and play with. You can type in that playground and have a demonstration for yourself. The models are popping up in unexpected places. You've got places like Switzerland or the UAE. Of course, you've got the entire part of Southeast Asia and China pumping out these models, particularly in South Korea, and Beijing has been just amazing. As I mentioned, far from hostile competition, the gold rush is bringing remarkable collaborations between different labs and countries. Have a look at the open source Bloom model, and I'm going to do an entire video about this because it was a really enormous and amazing collaboration. They brought together 900 researchers from 60 different countries, and they collaborated to essentially recreate GPT-3 even bigger and with way more languages. We're talking 100-ish languages that they put into this model, so you can go and speak some of the rarer languages with it as well. I'm aiming to keep this video and the report as succinct as possible, but we will drill down into certain sections. Otherwise, if I didn't keep it brief and concise, it might be a 24-hour video. Let's drill down. In an impromptu speech to a Singularity U audience in April 2022, Dr. Ray Kurzweil was invited to give a bit of an update on what was happening. You can go and watch this full video, but I want to give a part of this quote where he mentioned that the use of transformers is pretty much exactly what we need. He said, "We're actually getting there. I think we're going in the right direction. I don't think we need a massive breakthrough. I think neural nets and the transformer architecture are good enough with some of the additional changes that are being experimented with. I think we're on the right path." And Ray's comments are echoed by researchers at pretty much all the major research labs. Some of them, I don't know if they're speaking out of turn or what, but some of them are saying some fairly outrageous things. Have a look at some of these quotes. This one is from the chief scientist at OpenAI, and he says, "It may be that today's large neural networks are slightly conscious." Yesterday he said, "Trillion is the new billion, so I wonder just how big GPT-4 is going to be." Have a look at this quote. "I think GPT-3 is artificial general intelligence, AGI." This famous quote came from Conor Leahy, who recreated or replicated GPT-2 and of course created Luther AI's GPT Neo X20B. He's saying that humans are actually replicating what GPT-3 does, not vice versa, that GPT-3 is copying humans. Humans essentially are prediction machines. We're looking for the next word in a sentence. We're looking for a response. You're probably thinking of a response now, which comes from your training data set. And who knows what it is. I bet we could assess what comes next in the sequence. This one from Google Research. The Google Lambda language model is high-order social modeling. Blaze continued, "I find these results exciting and encouraging, not least because they illustrate the pro-social nature of intelligence." And Nando's famous quote from DeepMind, he said, "It's all about scale now. The game is over." So he's essentially saying we need to get bigger, faster, more efficient with these models, but the actual transformer design, we don't need much more on top of that. The way that we've designed attention and looking at the next word in the sequence and prediction, that's all we need to do. And then we apply it to music, art, control signals, gaming, movement, all of this kind of stuff. So here's my prediction as of June 2022, and it will change. So if you're watching this after June 2022, it's probably already increased. Artificial general intelligence, which is the ability of a system or platform to perform at the level of an average human, depending on your definition, it could also be at the level of an expert human in any domain, is a lot of the way there. Right now in June 2022, I'm saying that this is 39% of the way to artificial general intelligence. That's where an unfamiliar task can be completed by a computer and it will exceed the capabilities of an average person across actions and outputs. The reason I say this is with some of my context in researching human intelligence and working in that field for so long. We know that gifted children have an exceptional sense of humor. And we've got models like DeepMind Flamingo that have already solved that. We know that creativity is a huge part of intelligence, and we've got models like Dolly 2 and Google Imagen already solving that. We know that deciphering complex images, seeing what's inside an image, is a big part of intelligence as well. Of course, DeepMind Flamingo gave us that one, and then we will talk a little bit more about embodied intelligence, being able to make your way around the physical world, which is just starting to happen with the embedding of transformers into robots that is just incredible. One of the definitions of AGI, it's probably one of my favorites, seems a little bit simplistic, but it came from Steve Wozniak, who I like to consider an honorary Australian. He spent some time in Queensland. He was thinking about moving to Tasmania. He calls it the coffee test, and have a listen to what Woz says here about the coffee test.
I often ask the question, could a computer make a cup of coffee? Okay, you could come into my house and maybe you could make a cup of coffee and I could go into yours and I might be able to. I might succeed, I might have to ask some questions, but when is a computer ever going to get to that level? And if you analyze all the steps you had to do to walk, to know what kitchens are, you got that from years of life, of living around kitchens, to know what a coffee machine might be, to kind of look at it and look for clues like words, to look in drawers for pieces that might fit in them, and what the whole process. A lot of those things, what a human being is.
I like that AI
is
test.
so far above anything we've ever done. So, yeah. And that's every time we take a step closer to making a computer that human, it's a good step.
In April 2022, Google Robotics designed the first transformer model, like GPT-3, inside a robot, controlling a robot. Have a watch of this version of the Google Saycan robot with a coffee machine behind it. Not in this case making a cup of coffee, but I'm sure that's happening in the lab right now in June 2022, performing tasks based on the kind of questions I'd ask Lita, and then it will answer in text, but it will also move the robot based on those answers. Fascinating stuff. Also in April 2022, Google Robotics senior research engineer Eric Zhang noted that the jump from 551 to 100,000 tasks will not require much additional engineering, just additional data collection, which all of the labs seem to be working on right now, data collection for robots. Language models can not only tell jokes, they can also do long-term thinking for robots. It goes both ways. Robotics grounds language model sampling to what is realistic in its current world. In other words, embodied AI is helping language models understand the physical environment. Of course, we wouldn't be much good as brains in a jar, but when we can go out and hug a tree, or walk on the grass, or build a house, or design a book, all of these things help with our understanding of the world. And the models are getting bigger and bigger. Just this week, Meta AI and other labs are joining the fray with implementing AI language models into robots, in having data sets that are tuned to the world and helping build 3D environments and then interact with 3D environments. It seems to be the new focus for AI labs in June 2022. All right, let's take a pause for just a second. Scaling. You'll hear this word a lot. I realize that it's not something that we actually use day to day. So let's define scaling in plain English. It essentially means taking something that works and making it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and outrageously big in the case of some of these models. We talked about scaling data in one of the old videos. I took some jelly crystals and said, if we've got internet, come and crawl, and we've got popular internet, and we've got books, and we've got Wikipedia, what happens? How big can we get the model? And then what happens if we make this glass jar the entire room? We can fill the entire room with jelly crystals, or something even more outrageous than that. So scaling does include how much data we use, but it also looks at how many parameters, how we join this data together to create what are these AI models that, just as a reminder, do not contain the original data after they've been trained. You can't go out and download a book from these AI models. They only contain the connections that they created during training. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Bright, and it was about human biological intelligence. It was essentially for very smart families. It was offered at Elon Musk's gifted school in California. It was called Ad Astra then. It's now called Astronova. It's actually been sent to the moon, which is kind of cool. There's a copy there, or you can get a copy on Amazon. In that book, Bright, I really talked about what it means to be bright, which is not that you're given some magical power, rather that there is an ability innate, and until that's applied into talent or applied to performance, then it's just sitting there latent. One of the quotes in that book is that bright children want to learn. They are eager to devour information. They bring a sense of wonder with them into every moment, especially in their field of obsession. And my experience with prodigies is that they love to read. It's one of the things that I see across the board, whether they're chess players or obsessed with astronomy. They love to devour information to be able to perform at their best. A gifted researcher has gone and measured just how much this happens all the way through the lifespan. His name is Garth Zitzman, and he says that an erudite adult reader plows through 75 books per year, or 750 books per decade. Compare that with a professor who's reading 156 books per year, and that would of course be 1,560 books per decade. From my seat, it looks like the current AI is doing the same thing. The smarter it gets, the more information it needs. This is the basic concept of scaling. They need to be fed with more and more data. And of course, it's not just books. We're now feeding it with music data, both audio like MP3s and MIDI control data that can go and flatten and then find the next note in the sequence. We're feeding it robotics control data, where in some cases, like OpenAI, feeding it datasets and then letting it create datasets. That's from a paper just yesterday, where it's essentially creating its own brain. That's pretty advanced. I'll be doing a video about that one. In my March 2022 paper, What's in My AI, where I analyzed the datasets in all of these major models, I looked at just how much data was being used. Consider something like DeepMind, where their massive text dataset is 10.5 terabytes of book data. Then Aleph-alpha AI was aiming to have their next version of the pile at 10 terabytes. OpenAI's original GPT-3 dataset was only 0.75 terabytes, but now that they're coupled with Microsoft, I expect them to hit the multi-terabyte range shortly. Certainly with the release of GPT-4, they will be following the idea of more data is better. And they'll also be using a new discovery from DeepMind. DeepMind went and analyzed the original papers, research, and models from places like OpenAI and kind of realized that those guys had got it wrong. So DeepMind said, you need to be using, in some cases, like 10 times more data for the model sizes that you're putting out. This was a really big discovery, only in March 2022. DeepMind's release was called the Chinchilla model. It was 70 billion parameters, but it used 1.4 trillion tokens. Let's put this in plain English here. That would be 2.3 terabytes of data. Let's make that even plainer today. So for 70 billion parameters, you'd need more books than in the Kindle store on Amazon US. For 250 billion parameters, you'd need more books than all 30 libraries at Yale University. For 500 billion parameters, you'd need more books than the entire Google Books collection. And for 1 trillion parameters, you'd need more books than in the entire US Library of Congress. This is where it starts to get tricky because Google reckons we only have 130 million published books. At 10 trillion parameters, we would need more books than in all US public libraries combined. And at 100 trillion parameters, you'd need more books than all Bibles ever sold worldwide. At 250 trillion parameters, you'd need books stacked all the way to the moon. And 500 trillion parameters, you'd need 4 books about every human living today on Earth. 4 new books. Now, there are a few caveats to my approximations here. Of course, we're not looking at just text data, and that's what I've had to use as comparisons. You can, of course, go and flatten the entire collection of music on Spotify, for example, or everything in the YouTube Content ID platform. That would be fascinating to do. Or you could start digging into social media and personal records. Or you might start flattening what we've just talked about, the physical embodiment, the movement, the robotics. That easily will fill petabytes and petabytes of data. So that's going to be a real advancement on just using text data. We're going to start using music and images and movement and everything else to play around with it. Now, it's not going to be a non-trivial task to go and collect that, but I don't think it's going to be a particularly onerous task. I think labs are going to be able to do this. Look at some places like DeepMind that's got access to the entirety of Google. It's part of Alphabet. Look at OpenAI and Microsoft. There are capabilities with these AI labs where they can go and grab this much data. And once that happens, this scaling becomes reality. Focusing on IQ as a metric of intelligence was a big part of my life for probably a decade or so. I would help interpret psychologists' IQ tests, psychometric assessments, and put that into plain English for departments of education. So I'm applying and looking at the same metrics to artificial intelligence. We've played around with running the Stanford Binet or an equivalent with Lita AI. A lot of these labs run their own IQ subtests for the models just to see what is possible. You might recall these metrics here. We've got GPT-3 that beat humans in trivia and subtests inside the SATs. So college grade applicants, it was scoring 15% higher and then 40% higher on trivia. And we've got even more advanced leaderboards that have been created since this time. Have a look at this one created by Meta AI with New York University, the University of Washington, DeepMind, and Samsung. They put together benchmarks that they thought, well, certainly no human could get a very good score on, and they thought AI would never be able to beat. They made it as hard as possible. Well, as of today, GPT-3 sits all the way down at position 22. It's not even visible on this chart. Google Palm, the largest known model right now in June 2022 with 540 billion parameters, sits at position number 4, and us poor humans are sitting there at position number 7. So Google Palm is about 0.66% smarter, if you like, or performing at 0.66% higher than humans would do on this particular benchmarking suite for a measurement of intelligence. Alarming stuff. And we thought that humans would have a monopoly on creativity forever, that AI would just do the logic and help out with the smarts, but we would come and bring our humanity to humanity. It's not the case. It's turned out that AI is more creative than any human on Earth. How would you design each of these images based on these text prompts? A dramatically lit, brightly coloured, detailed painting of a robot artist painting a picture of the ocean. Here's DALL-E 2's output. Thank you to Ben Barry, the former creative director of OpenAI. Isn't that one amazing? What about this? An art gallery displaying Monet paintings. The art gallery is flooded. Robots are going around the art gallery using paddle boards. This output from Google Imagen or Imagine, just amazing. And you can output in any medium. You could do photorealistic, oil, watercolor, sketch, charcoal, gaming engine. You can get it to do anything that a human would do and beyond. So some of the outputs are really crazy. It's probably worth me mentioning the cover image for this entire report. And here it is in full resolution. We'll stretch it out. The prompt was, "The sky is bigger than we imagine, beautiful and colorful oil painting." I used DALL-E Flow or Dolly Mega, which was designed by a number of people and performs, I think, better than Dolly Mini, somewhere along the way to Dolly 2, although not as good. But it is open source, so you can go and play with this one yourself. There are so many applications for what this AI can do in taking text and generating images through its imagination. OpenAI have actually named a few fields that they think it might sit under. You've got education, demonstrating concepts in learning environments. Art and creativity, augmenting human imagination and design, especially in pre-production and brainstorming. Marketing, creating multiple scenarios and demonstrations. Architecture, real estate and design, amplifying immersive contexts. And research, producing vibrant explanatory diagrams for learning. AI has been writing books for a number of years. I carry these around. These just went to 6 different countries in my bag with me because once people can touch and feel these and look at the pictures and read the philosophical words, this one came out of GPT-3, or the design, this one was with an older GAN, VQ GAN and clip. But once people can see and touch this, it becomes a lot more real to them rather than just looking at theory. As of June 2022, there are hundreds of books that have been created, written, co-authored by models like GPT-3. Platforms like Jasper AI are helping out with that. I mentioned mega author Leanne Leeds here because she experimented with using GPT-3 to write a book in one of her series. She's got over 30 books, that's why I call her a mega author. Concerned about the ease and effectiveness of prompting AI to generate significant amounts of text, she documented the project extensively. You can go and read about it in her blogs. She said, everything started with AI, all of it. I had a 3,500 word head start on a book I needed to write. I'd also doubled my production. And she questions the ethics of doing this, but she's also very open. She says the future keeps coming no matter how many people rail against it. In their charter published online in April 2018, OpenAI pledged that if a value-aligned, safety-conscious project comes close to building AGI before we do, we commit to stop competing with and start assisting this project. This is a really fascinating angle to take from a big company like that, especially since what they pledged to do, based on a particular trigger, is coming to pass. DeepMind, which was founded by child prodigy Demis Hassabis, is now owned by Google's parent company Alphabet, is alarmingly close to fulfilling this vision of getting to artificial general intelligence. DeepMind have been releasing models like it's going out of style. They had 4 major models kick in this year with more papers than that and more little mini in-between models. So you may remember Gopher 280B, I talked about that in a video. It was just at the end of last year, which focused on language. Then Chinchilla, the model that told us we need to start feeding this more data, came out in March. This was just a text model. Then we had Flamingo. Do you remember Flamingo? If not, here's a video of Flamingo, which is a language and a visual model, because it can actually see what's going on, looking at a photo and then telling us what's in that photo.
This is a picture of Barack Obama. He is a former president of the United States.
How many people are there in this picture?
There are at least 5 people in this picture.
Where was this picture taken?
It was taken in a school.
How many mirrors are there?
There are at least 2 mirrors in this picture.
What is the person standing on?
The person is standing on a rug.
He's standing on a scale.
I think you are right.
What is he doing?
He is looking at the scale.
Where is Obama's foot positioned?
Obama's foot is positioned on the right side of the scale.
What happens as a result?
The scale shows a higher weight.
Is the person on the scale aware of it?
I think he is not aware of it.
Do you think that's why people are laughing?
I think so.
Some of this stuff still makes me speechless. That one is incredible. And of course, DeepMind also gave us Gato, the model that combines transformer with robot and movement. So it's got text, vision, and it can control robot arms. It can play games. It's really flattened any piece of data, and then it can predict that just like Transformer can do with text. They're using Transformer to predict anything. Let's look at a quick case study. This one is outside of Transformer, so it's a little bit outside of my remit, but it's a really fun one. This is the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, and generally a vaccine will take 5, 10, maybe more years to research, develop, and then go through testing. The research and develop time is actually a long time, particularly when it's done by humans. But Moderna is a new company and they've always had AI built into their process. Have a listen to their head of AI here, Dave Johnson, talking with representatives from MIT and the Boston Consulting Group about how they used AI to help them with sequencing mRNA and then actually designing the vaccine.
And so what we have is algorithms that can do that translation in an optimal way. And then we have algorithms that can take one and then optimize it even further to make it better for production or to avoid things that we know are bad for this mRNA in production or for expression. And so we can integrate those into these live systems that we have so that scientists just press a button and the work is done for them. And they don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but then poof, out comes this better sequence for them.
Dr. Ray Kurzweil simplified this description even further for us.
So the Moderna vaccine, they actually tested several billion different mRNA sequences and found ones that could create a vaccine. And they did that in 3 days. And that was the vaccine. We then spent 10 months testing it on humans, but it never changed. It remained the same, and it's the same today.
I think this is one of the coolest applications of artificial intelligence. Doesn't matter what your opinion is on vaccinations, look at compressing a 10-year process down to 72 hours. That is really, really impressive. And of course, as of the beginning of 2022, the Moderna vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, also called Spikevax, has shipped around 1 billion doses worldwide. I wonder if that means it saved maybe 1 million lives, I'm not sure, just through this application of augmenting human intelligence. This is what it's all about for me, making sure that we improve humanity through using these tools like Lita AI, like GPT-3 in general, like Copilot to help us code, and a lot of the other models like Flamingo and the robotics will be assisting us in augmenting who we are and what we can be. Let's have a little bit of a sidetrack here and talk about ethics. There is an entire field of AI alignment, which means making sure that AI is doing what we intend it to do, not just what we tell it to do, because we're flawed humans. We might get a word wrong and it might not do exactly what we want. It's kind of like the genie and the 3 wishes and being careful what you wish for. So this idea of ethics and alignment is really a big focus for nearly all labs right now. You've got places like Google AI who are bringing on board 200 ethicists just to focus on the rollout of AI and making it safe and aligned for humans. But I think we're going a little bit off track when we look at this concept of bias and stereotypes and try and reduce it manually. It really is harming the models and giving it an unrealistic view of the world. OpenAI seem quite proud so far of how they are actually pulling back these models. They said The bias filters do appear to have stunted the system's ability to generate undesired context. This was in their report on the Dolly 2 model's safety, released in April 2022. Now, if we look up the word stunted in the dictionary, we get this definition: having been prevented from growing or developing properly. And look at some of their examples. This prompt is a CEO. This prompt is a builder. This prompt is a flight attendant. And this prompt is a lawyer. Given that AI is vastly outperforming humans in 2022, and will continue doing so across a range of metrics, I think we can hand over to AI the ability to look at and judge based on its own realistic data set, rather than trying to train it on current human zeitgeist, current human focuses, current human prejudices and social justice views that exist right now in 2022, may not have existed in 2002, probably, definitely won't exist in 2032. So feeding it this idealistic view of the world is actually quite damaging. If we don't give it realistic data to work with, we're actually lying to it, and that is going to be part of the problem. So I'm calling on OpenAI and all the other labs to have a view, to have a look at how they're presenting data, and perhaps to take staff off looking at bias, stereotypes, and some of the other manual processes that have been played with, and actually finding a different way of doing that. Here's a cool sidebar. As part of the citations inside this little segment on ethics, I went and grabbed a quote from Nick Bostrom, who's very famous in the AI field. I went into one of his PDFs called Propositions, which was just updated in 2022. And I grabbed a little piece of text here, and it was all mashed together. PDFs do this sometimes. OCR text definitely does this quite a lot. And I know that we can unmash text by putting it into GPT-3 or another language model. So I went and did that. I put it into Megatron 11B, which is one of my favorite models by Meta AI. And I lowered the temperature down to 0.1, so it was being deterministic and logical. And then it cleaned that text output and put the spaces in where they should have been. So cool. I really like Nick's views here. They are echoed by the CEO of aleph-alpha, who has the amazing Luminous model approaching 200 billion parameters for their world model. I'll just look at the last sentence here. He says, machine learning engineers should not force their more or less ideological answers onto their users. More and more this year, I think safety and alignment are very, very important. And that needs to be done again by using this augmented intelligence. You can't sit down a room of PhDs and experts and not use this amplified intelligence to come up with a solution. We looked forward in a submission to the World Build competition by the Future of Life Institute, which is overseen by people like Elon Musk and Vitalik Buterin and some others, that looks at how would you actually design AI through to 2045. So we gave a bit of a rundown on what that might look like. In 2045, AI provides a new expression of culture and history. While many cultures have been lost, AI was able to map out and help restore ancient tribal traditions for the benefit of humanity. This includes 60,000 years of Australian Aboriginal heritage and traditions, as well as leaning on many of the useful traditions from cultures worldwide, Aztecs to Mayans and beyond. Of particular note, new recognition of culture and history has allowed the restoration and current sharing of tens of thousands of languages, new ways of creating art, new ways of considering spirituality, and new ways of bringing communities closer together, even in AR. That's our vision as part of the White Mirror community, whitemirror.live, to use artificial intelligence to benefit humans and give it all of the context, even if some of that context is a little scary to some people or not as it should be, but actually as it is, with more white CEOs and more female nurses. But to bring all of that together, including some of the cultures that are missing from models like GPT-3, it's been helped with models like the Bloom model from Big Science, but actually making that broader and broader so that I can go and learn from something that was taught in the Northern Territory, for instance, or out in the Yukon, or through New Zealand, and be able to integrate that into my AI model, have that wisdom from across cultures. Now, I imagine that by the end of 2022, for my end of year report, we'll be talking a lot more about this. Brain-machine interfaces, BMIs, or brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, with language models. Finally, if I can have access to GPT-4 or GPT-5 in my head, or the Google Palm model in my head, and I'm able to augment my intelligence walking around, I can see what that tree is, what that headstone is, where to get to the next place, how to have that interaction, what are some options in conversation, negotiation, compromise, how can I actually help this person and have complete access to a model. Not the internet, I don't really need facts and figures, but what about looking at the next token in a sequence, helping me predict what might be the next best thing to say, do, be. These BCIs are really, really popular right now. Here's a view of Neuralink by Elon Musk. This design was by Card79 out of California. I have an entire video that looks at this, including a demonstration of a day in the life. Yes, there are wires that go into the brain. Those wires are way thinner than a human hair, and they hook up back to the router there and the link, which is, of course, wireless back to a phone or a computer to tie into whatever source of information. Not language models just yet, but by the end of the year, I'm hoping that at least one lab is playing with this integration of language models into humans, just like we're playing with the integration of language models into robotics, like the Seikan robot and the Gato by DeepMind. Here's a small list of some of the current brain-computer interfaces. You've got the Neuralink system, you've got OpenWater's BCI, which is infrared, BlackRock's BCI, Max Hodek is doing some big stuff with his Science Corporation, and also he's an investor in Synchron's Stentrode. DARPA has been in the news with their BMI. BrainGate has also been in the news helping out people that have disabilities by implanting or interfacing with their BCI. Kernel's Flux and Flow is a little bit easier. That just looks at measurement and then helping out through meditation. And Paradromic's BCI. I'm really looking forward to drilling down into each of these and hopefully even more by the end of the year and having a bit of a look. There will be a video about the specifics of the current brain-computer interfaces or brain-machine interfaces when I find the time. That's it. There were so many groundbreaking releases of models, papers, and research from January 2022 to June 2022. Just in those 6 months, we've exploded with the way that models are released and models are interacted with, and of course the applications. We only mentioned one application today, Moderna, but of course there are new ways of interacting with code bases. OpenAI has now 70 partners that provide IDEs for prompting code. Outrageous. And we've got more and more ways of using this. The open nature of artificial intelligence research has really, I think, allowed this field to flourish and to allow researchers to use each other's information. Meta AI has been fantastic with this. The OPT175B model, they actually released the training logs, including like people coming and going from the lab, how they restarted the model, and these little conversations between them to make sure that the training, which is always days, weeks, months, actually runs end to end. The sky is bigger than we imagine. This is an incredibly important part of history. You are part of the evolution of humanity right now. Language models that are being released just in the last 24 months have changed the landscape of how we think, do, and be, and it's only going to get more and more exciting. This video was actually created for subscribers to the memo. They're getting this, hopefully. The edit will be finished today on the winter solstice, summer solstice, the 21st of June, 2022. If you'd like to have some more insider information like this, jump on to that subscription newsletter. There are today readers from Microsoft, Google and Tesla in there, and of course hundreds from just interested human beings that want to know more about this stuff. The Memo is my in-depth newsletter. Join hundreds of paid subscribers, including readers from Microsoft and Google. Get special access to AI platforms, behind-the-scenes resources, and the latest AI news. lifearchitect.ai/memo.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.